Okay, it looks like we are recording, so we should be good to go on our end.
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us tonight. This is the third of 6 public outreach meetings that will be held as part of the Binghamton Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative. Tonight's meeting is for local community advocacy groups, and the purpose is to solicit input from representatives of these groups regarding improvements or reforms to the Binghamton Police Department. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Megan Brackett. I work in Mayor Rich David's office as Assistant for Neighborhood and Youth Affairs, and I'll be serving as the moderator for tonight's meeting. As a member of this collaborative steering committee, my role tonight is limited to ensuring that everyone who has registered for this meeting has an opportunity to speak. For those of you who have joined us at prior meetings, either as steering committee members, speakers, or members of the public watching from home, I'll be repeating myself here as I give a brief overview of tonight's meeting structure for those joining us for the first time. So thank you in advance for bearing with me and for your patience. As you can all see on your screens, we are joined tonight by other members of the steering committee, including Mayor Rich David, Binghamton Police Chief Joe Zakuski, District Attorney Michael Korchak, Public Defender Mike Baker, and many others. Thank you to the entire steering committee for being here with us tonight for another meeting. Tonight, we're hearing from local advocacy groups on ways that the police department can better serve the city's diverse community, improve public safety, implement 21st century policing strategies, strengthen relationships and trusts, and address the disparities that affect communities of color. Your input is necessary to reach these goals as outlined in Governor Cuomo's executive order. For some context, the city has selected the Finn Institute for Public Safety to serve as an independent research partner in this effort. Finn is charged with collecting and tracking public input and themes during these outreach meetings and surveying stakeholders for additional input. Finn will be reviewing a video copy of tonight's meeting. For members of the public watching tonight, I want to thank you for your interest and remind you about the upcoming opportunities for public input. As I've said, tonight's meeting with local community advocacy groups is one of 6 outreach meetings. That includes an open public comment meeting on February 18th at 6:30 p.m. The full meeting schedule can be found on the Collaborative's page of the city's website. For those who wish to provide comment during any of these upcoming meetings, please email the Collaborative to register at bpdcollaborative@cityofbinghamton.com. Community members are also welcome to submit written comments through that same email address. And again, that's bpdcollaborative@cityofbinghamton.com. For tonight, we'll hear directly from representatives of local community advocacy groups. About a dozen representatives have signed up to participate in this meeting. And on behalf of the steering committee, I want to thank you all for taking the time to make your voice heard on this topic. Your participation tonight is important, and we appreciate you being here. In order to make sure everyone has a chance to speak, I'll make my way through our list of registered participants, turning over the floor to each of you one by one for up to 5 minutes. When your name is called, please go ahead and unmute yourself, introduce yourself, let us know which group you're representing, and whatever you would like to share as part of the record for this meeting. We want to hear your experiences, thoughts, concerns, and ideas for improving policing in our community. This is a listening session, not a Q&A or a panel discussion. For each speaker, I'll start the 5-minute timer when your input begins and leave myself unmuted, so hopefully you can hear the timer go off when we reach that time limit. At that point, I just ask you to please wrap up your comments so we can move on to the next speaker. After tonight's meeting, the steering committee may wish to follow up with you for additional input or questions. And again, all of this information is part of the community input record that will be included in the Finn Institute's compilation of public comment. And before we get to our list of registered speakers tonight, I want to first turn the floor over to one of our steering committee members, Captain Becky Sutliff. Captain Sutliff, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Hi, good evening. I'm Becky Sutliff, and I'm the Binghamton Police Department's captain of the Internal Affairs Department. The reason I'm talking tonight, because I wanted to bring forth some information. It was disseminated at top of last week's meeting by a member of the public that needs to be clarified and corrected, being as specific as I can without obviously without invading anybody's privacy, okay? First of all, there was reference of 5 instances of 7, 8, and 9-year-old children being restrained, by police since 2016. And I just wanted to explain a little bit about that. Each of these instances, police were called to help transport a child experiencing a mental health crisis to the CPEP Center. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's the Comprehensive Psychiatric Emergency Program at Binghamton General. It's for people in crisis, okay? Each of these cases, there was a parent or guardian not only present, but it also been the ones who had requested the help of the police in restraining their child. Social workers were involved in 3 of these incidents, and 2 of them were actually our mobile crisis social workers, came to the scene with us. And hopefully there's more people out there familiar with the service, but we do have social workers that work mobile crisis responses with us because it's a very important partnership. These documented use of forces in each of these cases we were talking about, each case, there was no more than officer restraining a child. I just want to make that clear, at the request or of the parent or the guardian in one case, to keep the children from harming themselves and other children, family members, the social workers, medics, and officers that were all trying to help them. Labeling these incidents as just laying hands on children is a gross mischaracterization of what happened. And it doesn't speak to the reality of our officers that are just being called to help families in crisis. It's a big, big part of our job. Also, there was a overstating applications of force on people who are under the age of 18. But I'm sorry, is there a problem? Okay. The statistics that we shared for 2019 were a bit off. So I'm not going to get deep into the specifics of it, but I wanted it to be noted that I understand the speaker was referring to people under the age of 18. Those stats, though, they included dozens of individuals who the criminal justice system viewed as adults. They were of age. Several of them, unfortunately, too, were armed with weapons when the use of force occurred. Understanding that's one part of the whole spreadsheet of statistics. But it does happen. Age doesn't stop people from being armed with weapons, especially with guns. And lastly, I just wanted to make sure that it was necessary, obviously, to get everything in the proper context. Because for many years, BPD has gone above and beyond in documenting any physical force used by our officers. We document applications ranging everywhere from touching an elbow in an escort position to restraining or holding someone back from danger or harming others, to counteracting a direct assault from someone, stopping a fleeing felon, and sometimes, yes, pointing firearms or tasers and hopefully not using them. But many law enforcement agencies don't consider these use of force. DCJS, who we report to monthly, their standards aren't nearly as broad as ours are when it comes to reporting the use of force. Our department feels that it's best to document any physical contact at all. And that's our way of being thorough and auditing our officers and holding them accountable. So I understand the term use of force may be interpreted differently by different agencies and the public, obviously. But it's important to understand how it is used by the department if we're going to have an open discussion about BPD policy. So hopefully that helps clarify things and opens up future discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Sutcliffe. Okay, we will move now right into our list of registered speakers tonight. Just a reminder that if you are here tonight as a speaker and if you have webcam capabilities, please go ahead and turn your webcams on. We have up first on our list of speakers tonight, Nicole Barron, Executive Director of Rise New York. Nicole, are you here with us tonight?
I'm here.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and start your timer now.
Okay. Yeah, so as Megan said, I'm Executive Director of Rise. Rise is a comprehensive domestic violence service provider. We've operated in the community since 1979. We provide shelter, advocacy, counseling, hotline, and community education services. So We would welcome the opportunity to serve on the steering committee. I know a lot of other domestic violence service providers have been invited to serve on their local steering committees. So unfortunately, it looks like no domestic violence agencies are represented, although we work closely with the police. But I do welcome the invitation to this meeting, though, and I really hope that the goal of police reform and reimagination is being taken seriously. I think we genuinely all can do better. In response to the racial justice protests, which included a huge turnout here in Binghamton, RISE has committed to providing our staff more trainings, more education, and continually re-examining our values. Domestic violence is linked to racism and oppression. Black survivors are at an elevated risk of intimate partner violence as well as intimate partner homicide. We would like to see plans for domestic violence services provided in any plans for reform. So I submitted 4 pages of written testimony for this meeting. Unfortunately, a majority of those pages were written accounts of negative interactions between BPD and our staff and clients. One of the prevailing themes of these accounts was that victims were hesitant to contact the police again after negative interactions with them. So this isn't really anything new. The National Domestic Violence Hotline found that 1/4 of women who had called the police to report domestic violence or sexual assault would not call again. But if we are reimagining policing, surely we can do better. If victims fear contacting the police again, this can put their family at risk for further violence. And it's also a public safety risk because domestic violence spills into the workplace and into the school. Another theme was that the police did not thoroughly investigate or the response was rushed. One client recounted driving with her abuser and a young child in the car. Both she and her abuser are white. Her abuser was high, he was driving erratically, he was screaming obscenities at her. This caught the attention of BPD, they were pulled over. He was let go with just a warning. It was a very brief stop. So they drove home and the abuser actually continued the abuse for several more hours. She was strangled repeatedly. She did not call the police because of this early interaction, but the next day she went to family court and she went to file an emergency petition and she met with one of our advocates then. So she felt that had the police intervened in this traffic stop, she would have been saved like further trauma. Another client reported that Binghamton Police Department responded after she called for help and was overheard by neighbors. Her abuser had broken into her apartment, he was causing extensive property damage, and he was verbally and physically assaulting her. He had actually trapped her under a mattress and was sitting on top of it. So Binghamton Police Department was there briefly, but did not take a full statement before leaving by her account. Her abuser returned minutes after the police left and continued his abuse as if nothing had happened. We also found a theme of police putting additional barriers in place for victims seeking help. Several clients were asked to obtain official copies of their order of protection from family court before being allowed to make a report of their abuser violating the order.
Nicole, I think you flipped over to mute for a second.
Okay. What was the last thing you heard by chance?
Probably about 5 seconds ago. It wasn't long.
Okay. So an accepted protocol is for police to check a database with all protective orders on it.
Okay.
Another BPD officer told a victim that she could not report the crime because it happened in Vestal, although it largely occurred in Binghamton. This is over 1 year after New York state law was passed, allowing victims to report a domestic violence crime in any jurisdiction. Several years of working alongside other local police has taught us that collaboration is possible, and when achieved, it's an asset to victims and the community. In October 2019, RISE received a federal grant for the Office of Victim of Crime, OGP, to place a victim specialist advocate at another local police department. So the advocate's responsibilities are to co-respond to domestic calls with officers, address the victim's immediate needs, and connect with services, call victims from domestic incident reports when co-responding was not possible, serve as a resource to officers, and provide trainings to the police on domestic violence. The goals of this program are to better hold offenders accountable, reduce repeat domestic calls to the same household, and help victims better access service. I would like to see this same type of program at BPD, along with intensive trainings on survivor-centered care and a better understanding of the dynamics of domestic violence. RISE is able to provide any domestic violence trainings for free. Thank you for that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We did just have your timer go off. We have your written comment, your full testimony, which will be provided to both the entire steering committee and then also included as part of the public comment record. Just in the interest of time and making sure that we get to everyone tonight. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, but I want to thank you for being here tonight and for sharing that. And as I mentioned earlier, members of the steering committee may reach out to you to follow up on your testimony tonight after the written statement is shared. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next on our list of participants, Sue Neubauer, WICZ. Sue, were you here just to watch tonight, or did you wish to provide input?
Oh, yeah, I had just registered to basically listen, but yeah, so I wasn't prepared to speak tonight.
Okay, we can move on to the next participant then. Thank you. Next on our list, it's Taliba Haley, Eastside 100 Moms of Color. Miss Haley, are you here with us tonight? Okay, I don't see her yet. I'll make a note to circle back at the end of the meeting. Alexis Pluce, Executive Director of Truth Farm. Ms. Pluce, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So my name is Alexis Pluce, and this evening I'm speaking on behalf of Truth Farm. We're a local organization that seeks to reduce the harms caused by substances by raising awareness, reducing the stigma, educating the public, and advocating for policy change. We research and are involved in multiple research programs, and we create educational programs and develop supports and ways to save lives and reduce the harms of substance use. Basically, we're experts in the topic of how to reduce the harms of substance use and addiction. I've heard concerns of substance use and addiction brought up multiple times during these hearings, and what I can tell you without hesitation and in full confidence is that policing and arresting people does not help. The task this committee has before you is to improve relationships between the community and law enforcement and to reduce racism in your operations. And we have several simple solutions to offer to that end. Pass a city charter to stop arresting people for misdemeanor level drug charges. It's one tiny step that could have a huge impact in saving lives. Every time we incarcerate someone for substance use disorder, they have 40 times more the risk of dying of a fatal overdose than someone who has not been arrested and incarcerated. Reducing these arrests would also improve community relationships and reduce racism in policing, as we know that these arrests are disproportionately impacting communities of color. Think it can't be done? Think again. Actually, multiple cities and counties throughout the United States have taken this powerful step over the past 2 years, and Binghamton could be the next city to do so. Broome County, I'm sure you all know, has the highest rate of incarceration. I find the dispute of statistics to be kind of comical, because this has been studied and proven by multiple criminologists and multiple organizations that Broome County has the highest incarceration rate in the state. And that is also frequently disputed by law enforcement. And in 2019, Broome County had more syringe arrests than any other county in the state. And this is absolutely unacceptable, because syringe access is a public health concern. It reduces HIV transmissions, it reduces infections, endocarditis, countless other hepatitis C, and things that cost our community health and wellness. And so we need to stop arresting people for syringes. Arrests and incarceration in Broome County are twice the national disparity in terms of Black people to white people. So here's a really simple idea. How about make it a commitment to eliminate that disparity altogether? Tie poor performance evaluations or cut in pay or cut in benefits or something like that in the police force every time they have a racial disparity in their arrest records. It would be a very simple solution to simply commit that you will not arrest more people of color than white people in our community. Number 4, reduce the number of police on the force to an appropriate number and shift those funds to community-based organizations that meet the needs of the people in this community, because that's the best way to reduce crimes and reduce police involvement, is to meet the needs of the people in the community first. Number 5, stop escalating situations by a show of quantity of officers to every situation. I've been blown away, certain things that I have witnessed when suddenly there's 7 police cars there, 14 officers, and a dog barking in the back of a vehicle. This is no way to de-escalate a situation that is typically already stressful and emotional. It's obvious when I walk downtown and see the line of pickup trucks parked in front of the city building, which belong to the officers who work there, and they have multiple images, stickers on their vehicles, which are racist symbols, that we have an issue in our police force related to racism. And looking at, you know, what has been going on nationally, and even what happened in DC, we know that a lot of times people who are in the police force are specifically racist. Looking at their vehicles and seeing these stickers should be a concern for anyone. Any one of the police officers who has these stickers on their vehicles should be terminated from their jobs immediately. And I think that every white person's testimony who is called in to say that they have no issue with the police, their testimony should be struck from the record. It really doesn't matter if white people have an issue with the police or not. That's not what the governor's order and the task that's in front of you is about. The fact that there are white people in the community that have no issue with the police should actually be evidence that we have an issue with racism in our community.
Ms. Plus, I'm sorry to interrupt. We just had our timer go off. I don't believe we've received written testimony from you yet, but if you want to send it over during the meeting or afterwards, we'll make sure it gets to all the steering committee members and is included in full as part of the record. I appreciate you being here tonight and sharing that. In the interest of time, we're going to move on to our next speaker. Next on our list is Andrew Prazak. He's a spokesperson for JUST. Mr. Prazak, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Andy Pragus. I am a founding member of the organization Justice and Unity for the Southern Tier, an organization dedicated to ending mass incarceration in Broome County in all its forms. Much of the work that we do is on the Broome County Jail and supporting people that are currently incarcerated to make sure that when they get out, they're in a better position to ensure their success. An endeavor, I might add, that the city of Binghamton does not support in the slightest. And actually, if we're talking about reducing crime and making sure that we have a healthier, safer community, making sure that people that transition out of jail could not be a better investment. People that are coming out of the Broome County Jail, this is not just from the prison system, but from the jail, have no support outside of that, which is provided on very short funding by a few smattering of organizations. And of course, when you get out, is incredibly difficult to navigate the various systems that are put in place in the various agencies, from county and city level agencies up to state and even federal ones. It's a difficult system to navigate. So that would be one of the first things that I would call for. You know, I am here today to advocate for real reform of the criminal justice system in our community, one that prioritizes and respects the humanity of all people, one that is invested not in just arresting and locking up people, but assisting all members of our community with a full and vibrant life. As such, I'd like to add my voice to add the voice of JUST and mine to the calls for stronger laws and regulations that will ensure an end to racial profiling by criminal justice actors, police included, but not exclusively, increased transparency and accountability for the Binghamton Police Department, a demilitarization of the police department, which we should think of as much wider and broader than simply certain types of equipment. Training is really important. The very militarized training we have in the United States that's replete with a lot of inaccuracies and fear mongering, frankly, which there's lots of academic studies on. I'd be happy to share them with you. Minimizing physical harm and unnecessary use of force, and most importantly, as Alexis just noted, reinvest in our community outside of the policing and criminal legal system. That I think many of you have gotten this list, the people's proposed reforms to ensure police accountability. I support each one of those in full. I would also add, however, in addition to investing in people returning from the Broome County Jail, that a full accounting, a full comprehensive review of what the Binghamton police actually do, how they actually spend their time, and the types of calls that they respond to is in order. As we know, many police are responding to mental health calls unnecessarily, calls that are going to be far better handled by other organizations. And I should also note, one of the real dangers here is that police will be just kind of an adjunct to a mental health unit or something like this. That should not happen. It should be mental health units divorced from the police. They've been shown to work in many cases. New York City is doing a pilot program. Cahoots Out is another one that we can look into and investigate. And I hope hopes the county committee takes this very seriously. We also need concerted effort, as Alexis noted, to ensure to examine and correct the incredible racial disparities in arrest and incarceration that happen in this county. 30% of everyone incarcerated in the Broome County Jail is Black. 5% of the population is. Do the math and you can figure out how many Black people Binghamton is sending into that jail every day. This requires really looking at how police arrest, for what and under what circumstances. I would also just like to add at the very end of my comments that I've come here to talk to the committee and try to move this process forward. I have to admit, however, that I truly have little hope that my voice will be heard. I know that I got a time slot, but frankly, especially the comments that I heard last week by Mayor David calling organizations like mine that have been consistent calling for police reform and an end to anti-racism, our organizations were called hate groups. Please think about that for a moment. I have no confidence in how are the people of Binghamton supposed to have confidence when administration calls organizations like mine who help put food in people's bellies, clothes on people's back, and pick up the slack of the county and the city. How are we supposed to take this process seriously when the people at the top are calling organizations like mine hate groups? And this is not the first time such scurrilous things have been said about our organizations.
Andrew, I'm sorry to interrupt. The timer just went off. I'm sorry that this isn't. It sounds like you guys probably can't hear when it's going off on our end. I apologize for that.
We can't. I would also just to end my comment very briefly, Megan. I'd also just like to direct everyone's attention to the chat. I put in a video of a 12-year-old girl being handcuffed by Binghamton police, and then a 13-year-old Black child being thrown to the ground and being handcuffed after he refused to open his backpack for the second time. He opened it the first time.
Andrew, thank you for your time. In the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next speaker. If you have written testimony, please submit it to the BPD Collaborative email. We'll make sure it gets to all of the steering committee members and is put it in full in the public record. Next up is Salka Valerio with Citizen Action. Ms. Valerio, the floor is yours, and I'll start the timer here.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. So first, I would like to say that Andrew Cuomo ordered this plan to happen in June. So I think it's very shameful that we started in January because he been put the call out, and I feel like that this community did not take that seriously at all because they started in January. When the community hit the streets, when everyone else was hitting the streets about Black Lives Matter. We didn't go out to the street in the middle of a pandemic because we all just wanted to have a party in the streets. We went out in the street because we wanted solutions. And because of that, starting in June, as soon as Andrew Cuomo did the call out, we were able to gather other organizations and go around the community to canvas and actually speak to people that were impacted by police brutality and things like that. We didn't go running to Miss Sally that sit in front of her window on the west side that called the police over barking dogs. We went to people that actually were impacted by these type of behaviors from the Binghamton police. We canvassed in every park on each side of the community, the west side, the south side, east side, north side. We went to every park and we met with community members to ask, how would you like the police reform to look like? What are your recommendations? After the march, we had over, I don't even think you guys as the city could even pull off having 400 people at Rec Park making a plan and talk about the issues in the community and what they wanted to resolve. You guys can't even get 20 people in your city hall chamber. We actually got 400 people at Rec Park talking about mental health, public safety, schools, jail reforms, and things like that. And the things that we recommended that was on the DROC paper, because I'm sure some of you guys have received it, these come from community members. They come from average people that work at the Ys, that work at domestic violence shelters, that work at the hospitals, that are nurses. These come from actually community members. My next door neighbor that don't have a job, like that put her input as well. We spoke to real people. We didn't speak to people that pretty much were neighborhood watch people and they never had real interactions with police. The other thing I wanted to say was that the board is supposed to represent community, and I really don't see that much. Like, where's the domestic violence people at? They're definitely important to have on your committee. Where's regular Joe Smo? His voice is important to have on the committee too. I haven't seen any of these faces canvass anything or even ask community members about their inputs around police or what the reform may look like. The recommendations that we have are not even recommendations that are not possible. Some of these recommendations that are listed were actually, even some of the people in the Trump administration agreed with some of them. So they are highly to be considered. So I'll just end it that the police should not be policing police, period. We need transparency. More community members need to be involved in the process. And I feel like you guys didn't take this seriously because you started way too late and just said, okay, let's get this together because this is what the governor wants. And also, I don't appreciate that our groups are called hate groups because we did nothing violent. Every march that we organized, we're very peaceful. Every march that we organized, we're actually really organized. Every march that we put together, at the end, we had solutions for people to come together to voice their opinions. Nothing was violent. People didn't hit the streets doing anything crazy. Called terrorists is because Andy said, also sitting at we give away food to people every Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we don't tell them to bring ID for them to eat. We give away clothes and we help our community out. So we're far from terrorists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valerio. Thanks for being here tonight and for taking the time to participate in this. Next on our registered participant list is Jordan. Is it Helen? Jordan, are you here?
Hello.
Okay, great. I'm going to start the timer and the floor is yours.
All right. Good evening, members of the Binghamton Police Reform Collaborative. I am speaking as a representative of the Binghamton chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, part of the DROC Coalition. The DSA stands for social and economic justice and for building a truly democratic society. It is out of this interest that we advocate for divesting from the police and prison system and investing in community well-being. The pandemic crisis we are all currently suffering through has been prolonged and exacerbated by our society forgetting any notion of a common good. of any collective responsibility for human well-being. The only public functions that flourish are those dedicating to punishing and controlling. I saw this on display in Governor Cuomo's nonsensical vaccine policies, finding hospitals that gave vaccines to the wrong people, and also finding hospitals that didn't use all their stock, a recipe for shortages. There is simply no notion of providing for as many people as possible and raising revenue to support it, only punitive action to maintain material scarcity. The same logic is on display in municipal budgets across the country that, like Binghamton's, have bloated police departments and anemic public services. If budgets are moral documents, then the budgets of our cities espouse an authoritarian ethos. We do not try to solve problems or help people overcome them, only to control and punish them when they fall through the cracks. This punitive morality is also very far from any notion of blind justice. As we've heard from other panelists, it falls disproportionately and more heavily on citizens who are working class and of color than those well-off and white. Policing, as an institution born from the shotgun wedding of slave catching and strike breaking, fits well into this vision of the city for the affluent, for businesses and landlords, keeping working people fearful and divided. I say that this is not the way it needs to be. In DSA, we advocate for a society which police and prisons are effectively obsolete. It is a far-off vision, difficult to bring into focus from where we are now. One step we can take towards making it a reality is bringing the bloated and unaccountable institution of policing under control by diverting its budget to real social welfare and funding mental health, crisis intervention, support for substance users, and education in its place. What this collaborative recommends will set the tone for how we in the city deal with the problem of policing. I urge you not to let this opportunity be squandered on more toothless and symbolic reform efforts, which in over 100 years of attempts have never brought the racist violence of policing under control. The only means we truly have to hold police accountable are through the control of funding, to fund the police and fund the community.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate your taking the time to participate tonight. And again, if there's written comment you'd like to provide to steering committee members, please send it over to the BPD collaborative email.
I think I did just before the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. It looks like we had Taliba Haley, Eastside 100 Moms of Color, join us. Miss Haley, if you're here, the floor is yours now. I think you're on, it looks like you might be on mute. Okay, I'm not sure if there's maybe a tech issue, but we'll circle back. We'll circle back again. What about Glenda Smith? Miss Smith, did you want to provide comment tonight?
No, actually, I'm listening. I'm a community member, a faith-based church member, and I'm just very anxious to see what our community can do, but especially formerly incarcerated people.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to the next speaker then. Is Brandy Jackson here from SEP? Is Brandy with us tonight? I don't see her. Okay. I see that at least earlier, and I think she's still on, we had Rainey Baldens, Rainey, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be able to pronounce your last name correctly, but with the Crime Victims Assistance Center. Rainey, if you wanted an opportunity to speak tonight, I can turn the floor over to you. Rainey, I see you're unmuted, but I'm not sure if maybe your mic isn't up enough. Okay, well, I will just say to whether people are having tech issues or not, you're always welcome to submit written public comment. There's also the open public comment meeting that will be held later this month. We also, what we've been doing at some of these past meetings is if we have steering committee members that intersect with the constituency group that is that this outreach meeting is for, we're happy to give them the floor for a few minutes tonight to speak. Tonight, I'd like to do that with Nicole Sergio Johnson. who is the president of the Broome Tioga NAACP. We're very fortunate to have Nicole on our steering committee, and I'd like to turn the floor over to her to provide some comment tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Members of the collaborative, BPD, the City of Binghamton, community members, the Finn Institute, thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Nicole Surgery Johnson. I am the president of the Broome Tioga NAACP, and I'd like to read to you a statement from our national organization, and it will then culminate into a list of demands, concerns for our local branch. Our oppression has reached its boiling point. The uprisings we've witnessed in cities across the country are a direct consequence of the racism, bigotry, violence, and subjugation against Black people that has festered in this country for far too long. The murder of George Floyd and the subsequent lack of accountability by the police has set into motion what can only be described as a moment of reckoning for our nation's conscience. How we become the land of the free depend largely on what happens next. As we continue to advocate in memory of George Floyd, now is the time to ask ourselves, what does justice really look like? Yes, we want all officers involved in the murders of Black people everywhere to be immediately arrested, tried for murder, and convicted. But justice for George Floyd also means bringing an end to the criminalization of Black skin. It means holding police departments accountable for their role in terrorizing our communities for years. It must mean a complete and thorough policy reset so that no Black person is ever put on trial for their own murder, as we have seen in the cases of Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Sandra Bland, and Michael Brown, to name a few. To ensure our survival as a free Black people in our country, two things need to happen. First, what has now become clear to the world is the ongoing practice of police brutality, specifically against the Black community. It's not only a civil rights issue, but it's also a human rights issue. The NAACP is calling on the United Nations to step up and classify the mistreatment of Black people in the United States by the police as a human rights violation, aggressively call out the US government in the process, and impose sanctions if necessary. Secondly, we need sweeping police reform, federal legislation mandating a zero tolerance approach in penalizing and/or prosecuting officers who kill unarmed, nonviolent, and non-resistant individuals in an arrest. Federal legislation must include the following principles: a ban on the use of knee holds and chokeholds as an acceptable practice for officers. The use of force continuum for any police department in the country must ensure that there are at least 6 levels of steps with clear rules on escalation. Each state's Open Records Act must ensure officer misconduct information and disciplinary histories are not shielded from the public. Recertification credentials may be denied for officers if determined that their use of deadly force was unwarranted by federal guidelines. Implementation of a citizens review board in municipalities such as ours to hold police departments accountable and to build public confidence. The elimination, of course, of racial disparities in arrests of Black and African Americans, as has already been stated this evening. For the portion of the community that African Americans make up in the city of Binghamton, we are disproportionately arrested in this city, and this needs to end. We support, the NAACP supports the widespread of body cameras and dash cam cameras for the entirety of an officer's duty. We support the implementation of the 21st century community policing model. We support review and revision of police use of deadly force policies, the comprehensive retraining of all police officers. The Broome Tioga NAACP supports increased, intensive, and intentional cultural competency training for law enforcement. Law enforcement prides itself on the measure of professionalism by which number of hours are used to discuss what professionalism looks like in terms of their training. For officers, much of their training involves the use of deadly force. According to a study by the Pew Research Center in a national survey conducted by the National Police Research Platform in 2016, in a representative poll of over 7,900 sworn officers, only 27%, less than a third of all officers everywhere report to ever fire their weapons in the course of their career. Yet, more time is spent in training officers in deadly force than in cultural competency. Whereas the city of Binghamton is a diverse community and where BPD officers spend more than 50% of any given work week interacting with ethnic populations different from their own, the Broome Tioga NAACP urges the increase of intentional cultural competency training of officers and a decrease in deadly force training, as it rationally runs counter to the needs of both our police department and the greater community. We also urge the increase of de-escalation training or the use of professionals trained with this expertise in all areas as appropriate. We also encourage the high comprehensive review and strengthening of police hiring standards. We encourage background checks on all officers coming from other forces across the country to serve in the Binghamton community. In an effort to increase professionalism of officers, it is important that those with misconduct cases should not be allowed to move in with ease to work in our communities, as this happens throughout the country within the profession of law enforcement. This is important. We urge the ban, and again, the use of knee-holds, chokeholds, and as an acceptable practice among law enforcement, whether it be in BPD or the sheriff's office. The Finn Institute we urge that the Finn Institute review all independent and credible data as it relates to Binghamton Police Department practices and patterns that have arisen in recent years. I want to thank you all for your time and attention this evening, and again, to the work that is being done in this collaborative and the research for it. Thank you.
Nicole, thank you for being here tonight, for providing that input, but also for your work on the steering committee and your participation in that. I want to thank everyone who signed up to participate tonight. As a reminder, please submit written testimony to the BPD collaborative email. We'll make sure that it gets sent to all steering committee members and is also included as part of the public record. All of these public input meetings are recorded and will be available online on the City of Binghamton's website under the 2021 Binghamton Police Reform and Collaborative webpage. The next public outreach meeting is for business organizations and will take place this coming Thursday, February 11th at 6:30 p.m. Business organizations representatives can email bpdcollaborative@cityofbinghamton.com to sign up and participate in that meeting. And in addition, as a reminder, any resident who has thoughts, questions, or input in general can also email that same address at any point to submit written comment. There will be the open public comment meeting on February 18th at 6:30 p.m. where any member of the public can sign up to speak. Thank you again for coming tonight and for participating. We truly appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.